We'll do it live. Let's see. I like it better there. Hello, anybody and everybody. I'm not sure to tell. Is there anybody in here? If so, let me know how my microphone levels are. If you can hear me. Can you see me? Yeah. So I've never done one of these directly. Hey, Deborah. Can you hear me okay? This is my first time doing one of these through YouTube itself directly, and I just want to make sure I am being heard. So if you could just give me a thumbs up or something. Yeah. Let's see here. I'm giving a minute for some people to trickle in. Oh, I do want to make sure that everyone can hear me. So if Deborah, if you could somehow, I think there's a chat feature somewhere here. If you could put in chat. Oh, did you already? Okay, so I do sound good. Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't notice there was a side window. So you're in snowy Maine. Oh man, New England is, if Gandalf the White were to appear in front of me and offer me, a large parcel of land anywhere in the world, it would be in Vermont or somewhere in New England. I have so many amazing fond memories, especially from Vermont. I always found how crazy it was that, here's this, what's up, Joe? Here's this state, Vermont, it's like 9,000 square miles. I grew up in New Jersey, which is 6,000 square miles and has a population of 10 million people. And Vermont is 3,000 square miles larger. And the last time I checked, I think has a population of 800 and something thousand, making it the 49th least populated state. And yeah, it's and you can be in New York in 5 hours, and everybody up there takes care of the land. I never, my one of my best friends in the whole world, who was unfortunately killed by a freight train about 15 years ago. He and I spent an entire summer driving around Vermont seeking out secret swim holes. And, we would drive into these little towns, where it's just a dirt road and start talking to local people. And we've got hundreds of swim holes. And unlike most places, you would not see a piece of trash. You would not see, spray painting on the rocks. People took care of things. It's just such an amazing state. And, one day perhaps I will, not retire there, but, um, maybe have a small piece of land, because my dream is to still be nomadic. I've recently, after this whole process of just, failed starts, I've finally came to peace with, the mistakes I made in the past. And I've got my fire back, which feels so great. And I'm feeling very called to hit the road to start filming, uh, uh, start filming interviews for the documentary. I'm going to be documenting the trip itself. I'm also writing a biography about my father. Um, but one thing that the last few months has taught me is I thought I was going to be able to do that job in a Subaru Crosstrek with a roof tent. And maybe if I didn't teach ancestral living skills, which requires lots of tools and raw materials, and maybe if I wasn't a professional photographer and videographer, I could pull it off, but there's just no way. And I'm a very particular person when it comes to my things. And right now, two-thirds of my crucial belongings to my business and myself are in California still. They're being brought up to me this week, finally. Thank all the gods, so I can finally get my schedule up. But yeah, I'm just realizing the Subaru is too small, so now I'm somehow trying to manifest um, an older four-wheel drive van that I can build out and truly have a self-contained unit to where, if I come visit a friend, all I have to do is bring in like my bag of clothes instead of, vomiting my things all over their house. I really hate feeling like I'm imposing on people. Um, and my friend whose house I'm staying at, talk about a true definition of a caretaker. Um, he has been he had been emailing me for 15 years, wanting to set up a long-term private study, mentorship with me. And I was always busy. I was doing Primitive Arts Collective after I left tracker school, and then moved to Virginia to do Earth Village Education, which led me out here to Oregon to where I worked for 6 years. And then for the last 4 years, I've been, desperately trying to earn a living. And when I was finally out on my own, Evan was my first apprentice, or trackolite, as I call them. And yeah, so he's a good friend for helping me out in the ways he has. And yeah, one thing that I've learned in the last 4 years, having endured the loss of my mother, my father, my soulmate, my dog of 18 years, my life savings, all while being alone and having to endure it alone, is that when, truly special people come into your life that really help you when you need help, and have the awareness to recognize that, hey, this person is struggling and I'm able to provide something for them that will make their lives easier. So yeah, I'm very grateful to not only him, but everybody who has helped guide me over these last 4 years, whether it be in business matters or things like that. I love getting emails from you all. Um, it's the messages I get daily are literally the wood that stokes the fire that got me my spark back. Um, yeah, especially some stuff I had to deal with yesterday that was really unpleasant, and on into today. But just after a few conversations with people who, I know I can trust, and have stood by my side through everything, um, that is worth more than its weight in gold. What's up, Yannick? Welcome. Um, yeah, one thing I've also learned as an entrepreneur is there are all sorts of different types of profit. Um, not just money. I always I'm always willing to barter for my classes. And through that, I've learned a ton about auto repair, which is something I wish I learned a lot more about when I was much younger. as well as a variety of skill sets. And, or just, when you go out about your day, embracing the way of the caretaker and you help somebody with something and, you can see they're having a bad day and then you help them and are nice and friendly and you can see the sparkle come back into their eyes and you know that they're going to carry that spark with them the rest of the day and spread it. And once again, those moments to me are worth more than any amount of money in the world. In fact, money aside, if you count things like that as profit, I'm one of the richest people in the world because I'm blessed to have such an awesome group of friends and supporters and students. And, all thanks to this guy right here. I was thinking as I've been going through this, memorabilia I have and auctioning off these illustrations, that there is not one single segment of my life, not one single thing in my life that I have that I don't owe to him. Every relationship I have, at just about every passion I have, all of my friends and acquaintances, how I look upon the world, uh, just everything, is all because of him. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't all be here at this point in space and time having this session right now. So I originally, when I set out about coming up with this idea, I said I was going to go in chronological order, and tonight I'm going to break the rule since it's the first one. And I'm actually going to save the first chapter of the tracker for the next one. So the plan for these are, as of right now, Monday nights at 5 and Friday nights at 5. I'm going to run one. I'll read a chapter, and then if people have questions in chat, I may offer some thoughts after it, and also use it as a way to keep you guys up to date on my happenings. One thing I wanted to read from this book. Now, this right here is the number one first off the presses copy of the book, The Tracker. And while I'm sure, I'm doing this whole auction thing, while I'm sure somebody would pay a lot of money for this, there's absolutely no way I would sell it. And that is because of this. On the inside cover, my father wrote a dedication to my mother. And when I was thinking about tonight, I was debating whether or not to read this. And I decided to because I missed the hell out of my mom. And, many people never met my mother. My parents divorced in, let's see, I was going into seventh grade, so I was 12, so 91-ish. My mother, if it weren't for my mother and her oh so gentle way of nagging people, this wouldn't exist. The tracker school wouldn't exist. So anyway, to Judy. Now I must try to express in words things that can never be expressed in any language. I was once worshiping nature and felt secure, and then I met you. Birds sing louder, flowers smell prettier, skies are bluer, and the whole realm of nature becomes more glorious than I ever imagined. Now I am deeply in love, fulfilled, and happier than any one man should ever deserve. Thank you, my love, for making me a complete man, more so than anything I ever imagined. And thank you for believing in me when no one else could or would. Judy, without you, my life would be an empty abyss, and without you, this book would never be. For you have been my strength, wisdom, and guide, and given me your all, and most important, your love. I love you so much, Tom. Wow. Yeah. My biggest struggle in all of this is, having to go this alone, especially the business side of things. I would literally lop off a pinky for a business partner. So anyway, as I said, I'm gonna skip the opening chapter because it's pretty long, and I forgot about a previous engagement I had, and so I wanted to start with a rather well-known story that my father talks about during the standard class, and that is, of course, Go Ask the Mice. It amazes me when I look back how little Stalking Wolf taught me was done in words, and how deftly everything was done. He never gave me a direct answer, and when he had something to teach us, he arranged it so that it was something we suddenly needed desperately to know. He took us tracking one cold December day when the temperature changed, as it does in New Jersey, 4 or 5 times, from freezing to morning ground, freezing to above freezing in the same day. We made some tracks in the early morning's ground and waited and watched as temperatures played havoc with their shape. That was great, we told Stalking Wolf when we were finished, but he shrugged a modest disagreement. When he spoke, his hand came up as if it were the true speaker and made pictures to fill in where there were no words. English is a bad language for certain kinds of words. It hasn't got much for ideas like wholeness of feeling. Nature is the best word English can come up with to describe something as various yet as invisible as the bond between all living things. Most of what it feels like to be there in the woods is inexpressible in any language. The only language for some things is experience. Some experiences simply do not translate. You have to go to know. Stalking Wolf's handmade pictures of experience for which there were no words in either Spanish or English, for concepts thought to be daydreams in New Jersey. There was no way for him to say to us that we should never so focus our attention that we were not also aware of the larger pattern around us. Where our schools were forcing us to pay total attention, Stalking Wolf was teaching us intermittent attention. It's a great line there. And I lost my place. A constant refocusing between minute detail and the whole area around it, between the track and the whole pattern of the woods. And that right there, folks, is the secret to my photography, by the way. When we said what a great experience it had been to sit and watch the track deteriorate, Stalking Wolf said the raccoon liked it, the squirrel disapproved. The rabbits shook their heads at it, and the deer had no feeling for it at all. His hand moved the animals in to look over our shoulders to see what we were staring at so intently that they would come up on us unnoticed like that. The fingers shrugged and went away again like the animals had while we sat staring at the track. Rick and I groaned at all we had missed again. You do not look, Stalking Wolf said, as if he were laughing at us. But we had to see the track, I said. You told us to watch the track. He tried not to laugh. How do you eat a deer? He said. His hands made a shape much bigger than his mouth. His eyes did what they always did. They looked at me and then looked away. It came back to my eyes again, like a beacon focusing its light in my direction on every revolution, but for only part of the time. When he listened, he seemed to be listening to a totally different conversation with his other ear. I had thought that the motion was only an idiosyncrasy of the body, a tic from being old perhaps, but it was how he took in all those things that we did not. In little pieces, I said. It seemed so obvious looking backward from the answer. It was a long time before I could judge the rate of change in a track or something else I was watching, so that I knew just how much time I could spend on each thing and still catch the subtle changes. Stalking Wolf always knew what was going on. If you spoke in a room where he was sleeping, he knew everything that was said. When he taught us stalking, we had to sneak up on him, but we were never able to do it. He would turn before we got close enough to touch him and tell us exactly how we had come up behind him, where we had brushed against a tree, and where we had stepped on a twig. And he was always right. If we spent 3 hours sneaking up on him, he was aware of us for at least 2 of them. He knew exactly how much attention he had to devote to each thing to measure it and keep the vision of the whole pattern going at the same time so he could see the disturbances. That is a very important lesson there, by the way. Because he knew the daily pattern of life in the forest. He knew what was normal for the weather and the time of the day. He knew how much bird activity there should be, which shift of predators was around, when the mice would be running from place to place, but he had to keep an ongoing record of it in his mind. He had an incredible memory for detail, as if he took the whole scene in instead of focusing on one part of it as most people do. He could recall every detail because he knew the experience as a whole. Wide angle mind. Everything fitted in with the ongoing pattern of the weather he kept in his head. I believe he slept with his window open so that the record could be kept even while he was asleep. Although I do not believe that he was totally asleep for very long at any one time. Maybe he had figured out how much his brain he could afford to rest at any one time, and for how much time he would have to shut it down altogether for recuperation. He always seemed to know what was happening all around him, as if he had ears and eyes all over his body. Once, while we were walking in the woods, Rick was looking around and twisting his head up towards the branches and down onto the path as a way of scanning things. I believe the fact that he moved his head so much instead of moving his eyes had a lot to do with why he was not as good a tracker as he might have been. We went under a tree while Rick was looking up, and Stalking Wolf said, "Let it sleep." He kept walking, but we begged him to tell us what was sleeping. He nodded at a great horned owl on a branch above our heads. I was sure he had not looked up as we had approached the tree or as we passed under it, but I gradually came to realize that he did not see it to know it would be there. He knew the way the owls lived. He knew what kind of trees they liked. He had seen the fresh owl pellets on the ground at the base of the tree. He knew when owls flew and when they rested. He knew the activity of small rodents for the time of day and temperature. He could probably have told us what tree the owl would be in if he had stayed at home. We pleaded with us. I'm sorry. We pleaded with him to tell us how he knew, and he said that the mice told him. When we wanted to know what the mice had told him, he said, "Go ask the mice." So Rick and I spent the next couple of weeks studying mice. Thereafter, we watched them to see what they were doing at what time of year And we found that Stalking Wolf was right. Once we knew the pattern of life for the mice, we knew the pattern of life for everything the mice that eats mice. And we could generalize the most other small rodents until we had a chance to study them the same way. We also knew to some extent the lives of the things that ate the things that ate the mice. Stalking Wolf did not simply tell us where the mice were or why they were there. He let us go and discover the whole thing for ourselves. We learned whatever we made important in our lives. The mice were good medicine. They led us beyond their mystery to the mystery of the way the lives of the animals are interdependent. They led us to an idea how the whole fabric meshes together, although it may be that you have to live as long as Stalking Wolf and observe as keenly as he did before the pattern makes total sense. When you can see that pattern, you can see the spirit that moves in and through all things, instead of merely catching isolated flashes of its motion in good medicine and omens. An omen is an insight that changes your way of seeing the world. It is a landmark against which everything that follows or preceded it comes to be measured. An omen is the shadow of the spirit that moves in all things. I believe that Stalking Wolf could perceive the spirit directly, and that was what he was watching and listening to when he seemed so far away. The more we learned to let our attention wander and come to rest on one thing at hand, just often enough to catch the disturbances, the better we became as trackers and as observers of the woods. But I had a strong tendency to zero in on things, to blot out everything else and just concentrate all my attention on the track. I would be aware of everything as long as I was stalking, but when I got on an interesting trail, I went track by track with my head down like a bloodhound smelling along the ground. I found the trail of a huge deer that way once, the kind of deer it would have been good medicine just to see. He walked it down one of the trails about 20 yards, and then he leaped up into the bushes and went down several branches of the same run. I followed it step by step, crouching down half the time, and before long, I was back out on the road, coming up behind my own tracks. Even before I looked, I knew those deer tracks were going to be all in my footprints. I was mortified. The deer had been stalking me. That was bad enough, but Stalking Wolf was going to be out with us that weekend, and in a few hours he was sure to come by the place and laugh at those tracks until he cried. I decided the best thing was to tell him, so I did. And he limited himself to a half smile and said, "Wait." His hand made a space of time it was hard to misunderstand. "Follow," he said. Then he went down the road, leaving fine, clear, obvious footprints for me to follow. It was so obvious that I thought there must be some nuance of the track that should tell me I was being circled. So I scrutinized each track as I went, looking for something I didn't know to look for before. The track went around the bend and then up a trail to the left. It went up step by step, looking for I did not know what. The tracks got a little funny though. I could not say how, but then they just stopped. I stood up and I looked down at the blank trail. I felt I felt something behind me and looked over my shoulder, but Stalking Wolf ducked away around the front of me in his crouch, and I didn't see him. He could get right up next to a person and stay out of their sight. Rick and I practiced matching strides with people in their house and walking directly in their footprints as their foot left them. Then dropping off and slipping away unnoticed. We tripped a few heels learning, but we did our early practicing on each other, and no one noticed. Stalking Wolf had been out walking in my footsteps halfway down the trail. Finally, he burst out laughing. I couldn't believe he was there. How did you do that? I wanted to know. I had to wait until he stopped laughing to get an answer. He walked backward down the trail without looking, and when he got to the road, there were the only footsteps he had walked up it in. He had put his feet going backwards and without looking into exactly the places he had put his feet coming up. Rick eventually learned to do this very well, but it was always beyond me. At least, the exact register Stalking Wolf had. But where were you? I demanded. He hopped off the trail and stood beside it, leaning against a tree. It felt worse than having been trailed by the deer. How could I have missed you? I wanted to know. I thought he had some secret way to make himself invisible that we did not know about yet. I don't think you look, he said. And I realized he was right. I hadn't looked. I had been so intent on the track that I had not kept checking it against the pattern of the woods. There was no need for a lecture or an explanation from then on. I looked less at the tracks once I had registered what I could of things that would not change for a while, like size and species. I looked for the track, I looked not for the track, but for where the track was going. When I lost the track after that, I would scan ahead to see where it was going. When I looked in the intervening spaces where a paw or a foot should have come down, I usually found a minute scratch or scuff mark where the very prints should have been. Very early in our training, we had drawn the track and then learned to identify the animal from smaller and smaller portions of the track. After we learned to look ahead and around instead of continuously down, we tracked more easily and much, much faster. Stalking Wolf could track at a dead run, and once you learn to track that way, it's not difficult to track from a moving Jeep. Stalking Wolf led us to situations where we could learn certain principles, but once he had shown them to us, it was up to us to put in the hours and hours of practice it took to acquire the skill. Stalking Wolf showed us that the tracks deteriorate differently under different conditions, but it was up to us to go around putting little sticks in every track we saw to measure how much it had gone down since we last saw it. He taught us how to learn, and we learned. From time to time, he would come out of the woods with us and see how far we'd progressed in our skills and give us a hint of new directions to go in. He had been moving us in a direction of survival, as well as training us to stalk and track. He was teaching us to live with the woods rather than in them. He always told us that nature would never hurt us if we acted rightly toward her and did not panic. It became the unshakable foundation of which we based all our actions in tight situations. It was the major tenet of our faith. Fanatics that we were, we put our belief to the test continually. But whatever we went with, our instincts, we always fared far better than when we depended solely on reason. But in ordinary circumstances, when there is no immediate threat, learning and logic had much more to do with our survival. All day long, we had been watching the weather modify the track. We gave no thought to time, but it began to get late in the day, and Rick and I suddenly realized we were hungry and had brought nothing to eat. It was getting long past when Stalking Wolf would normally have started for home on a day trip, and we kept waiting for him to say it was time for us to start back, but he seemed ready to settle in for the night. We waited for him to tell us what we should do next, and we got hungrier and hungrier. Finally, I said, "Well, Rick, let's go fishing." But the lake was frozen over, and we had no tools for ice fishing. Stalking Wolf sat there laughing at us as if as we ran over to the lake and back. We got back out of breath and told him the lake was frozen over. He nodded as if it were interesting but tangible information. We waited for him to tell us what we were going to eat, and finally Rick asked him, "What are we going to have for supper?" The old man said, "Tortuga." Rick shouted, "Tortuga? Of course." I ran, and we ran back toward the edge of the lake. I ran after him, demanding to know what we were running after. "Snapping turtle," he called back over his shoulder. We had been digging in the frozen mud for 15 minutes before Stalking Wolf came over with a thin stick about 3 feet long. He walked along, looking at the ground, and pushed the stick in. He waited a minute, then pulled it back out, as if he was throwing back a fish that was not perfect. He then poked as if he were poked the stick in again and waited and threw it back another. On the third try, he put it partway in and went tap, tap. Rick and I started digging around Stalking Wolf's stick, and just 2 feet down, there was a huge snapping turtle, still too torpid to move. I was going to ask Stalking Wolf how he did it, but I knew he would only tell me to look. So I looked closely at the other two places where he had put the stick in the mud, and there was a little raised rim of mud where the turtle had dug himself in. When we cooked the turtle in its shell with some herbs and had eaten it, it was clear Stalking Wolf intended for us to spend the night. But we hadn't brought sleeping bags or even the double blankets filled with rags that we sometimes used for sleeping bags. And we had no cabin. We asked Stalking Wolf where we were going to sleep, and he said to make a lean-to out of pine trees. We had worked our way through enough of the Boy Scout manual to know how to do that. And when it was finished, Stalking Wolf told us to fill it with old dry pine needles. When we had it filled, we built a fire with a reflector wall to throw the heat into the lean-to. Then we buried ourselves in needles and went to sleep warmer than I could remember being in my sleeping bag. After that, whenever Rick and I went out to camp, something was missing, like the matches, or the wood, or the food, or the knives, until finally we realized that Stalking Wolf was taking those things away from us to force us to survive without them. Eventually, we could live in the woods with only our open hands. We knew the berry seasons and where to get the edible roots. We knew how to fish and where to find our food. And if we had to, we knew how to snare a rabbit or kill a deer. Our snares were clumsy attempts that merely detained an animal rather than killed it. Stalking Wolf snares always looped only around the neck, and his sapling lashed aloft like an executioner's cord, snapping their necks instantly. One instant they were running in full flow of the woods, and the next they were gone. It always gave me something to think about whenever I set a snare. Stalking Wolf set out to snare to show us how to make the catch pin slip easily and untie the bent sapling when the rabbit triggered it. He did not kill animals except for food, and then generally only if it was a matter of survival. He had killed the rabbit only to show us how it could be done, for when we really needed it to survive. He had made us go 2 days hungry, waiting for the snares to be tripped when we finally did the snaring ourselves. And we were lucky that the snare had something in it in less than a week. But Stalking Wolf had read the tracks and put his snare down on the rabbit run and caught a rabbit coming back from wherever he had been. He gave us the rabbit and told us to cook it. After we had struggled, skinned it, cleaned it, and roasted it, we ate it. It did not taste like any rabbit I've ever eaten before or since. Afterwards, we had learned to stalk each other. Stalking Wolf had us stalk him. When we thought we had mastered it, he sent us to stalk animals. Every few weeks, he came and watched us and told us where we had made the animal aware of our presence, or how we had stepped on a twig instead of looking for it and stepping under it. He showed us how to stalk a deer for hours until you come up so close that you can just reach out and touch him. If there was a predator around, Stalking Wolf would give the deer a smack on the behind for being so careless. But as often as not, he would stand along the trail and let his hand hang out like a branch, and it would drift over the backs of the deer as they went by. And once one of them stopped to scratch itself against his fingers, Stalking Wolf started scratching its back, and it rubbed back and forth as if it were a branch. Rick and I got good enough to get within sight of a deer almost immediately, but it was 2 years before Rick touched his first deer. I had to wait until 6 months later, when they were less skittish, because they knew hunting season was over. Rick was always a better stalker than he and Stalking Wolf were. Very happy for me when I finally did it. No one else believed me, of course, and it was one of the rare times that I mentioned what really went on in the woods. Stalking Wolf came with us the weekend to celebrate, and after we had eaten, we sat around the campfire and coaxed him into telling us stories. Stalking Wolf was probably one of the last Indian boys to be brought up in the old ways. I believe he put us through the training that he had been put through. He told us how the braves of his tribe had stalked the deer in the same way we had. He told us of his good friend Medicine Deer and the true test of stalking, bear smacking. Boys of his village often teased one another to do it, and from time to time someone did. Stalking Wolf and Medicine Deer had come upon fresh bear tracks one day. They were 15 then, young warriors of a defeated people without a battle to offer their courage or their skill a chance to win them distinction. Because they were young, they took whatever risks were available, and Medicine Deer claimed the right to stalk the bear since he found the first track. Stalking Wolf's only choice was to watch him from a distance. To have gotten closer would have infringed on Medicine Deer's daring. Medicine Deer went forward, moving with the rustle of the leaves on his feet, turned softly inwards, going in bursts of small, well-placed steps like any creature whose life depends on not being seen. He moved from tree to tree in low, fast-moving semi-crouch. He froze when the wind stopped rustling the leaves. The bear nibbled berries from a bush. Medicine Deer moved in the last few feet in short, quick steps. When he stood up behind the bear, he did not smack it right away. The measure of his courage was how long he stayed risking each second that the bear would catch his scent on a sudden change of the wind and turn on him at close quarters. Finally, he gave a war whoop and smacked its tail. The bear gave a howl of bewilderment and indignation before it turned to pursue him. Medicine Deer was a great runner, and he was outrunning the bear, giving loud war whoops of victory. When he stumbled and broke stride, the bear caught and killed him. I asked Stalking Wolf if he had ever smacked the bear, and he said he had, but not since Medicine Deer. Some things, he said, were for young men, and watching the bear kill Medicine Deer had made him very old. I could not understand that then, but although there were few, if any, bears in the Pine Barrens, I swore to myself that if I ever came to a place where there were bears, I would try what Medicine Deer had tried. But my skill was not up for it for a long time, and my luck was not up to it when I finally got my chance in the Grand Tetons. Wow. It has been a long time since I read that whole chapter. I've periodically. Hey, everybody who joined, and quite a few people. Awesome. It's good to see you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's I've obviously, read my dad's books quite a few times throughout my life. And at every point in my life that I've read them, I've learned different lessons from them. And I've purposely avoided reading them in a long time, ever, even before I had this idea of this live YouTube show. And God, just in that first chapter alone, some of the concepts and ideas that he talks about are things that I could teach a class on for 3 days or 4 days, just about knowing the woods and identifying the patterns, the baseline, knowing what's going on around you. I call it the woods mind, where you can just look at the landscape in wide angle vision and just know where the best place to go look for water source is, where you might find a good branch for a bow drill, where the nearest animals are. And those kind of instinctual skills that we all still have, they've just become atrophied like our physical senses. It's totally capable for anyone. You just have to put in the dirt time. Yeah, it's one of the things that really upsets me. Lately somebody on I think it was a Tracker School fan page, posted an $89 online course that certified you as a wilderness survival instructor. And I'm just like, well, first of all, there's no such thing. The only thing that gets you that is dirt time. Yeah, it's hilarious. I'm actually, I love that term dirt time so much. I'm actually getting it tattooed on my knuckles here before too long. But yeah, does anybody in chat have any thoughts they want to share? I'm constantly exploring new methods of doing online programming, and I wanted to try this one out. The thing I like about Zoom a little better is, people can join via video as well. So the next one I may do via Zoom. But yeah, if anybody has anything they want to throw up in chat before I wrap it up, I want to first, while you're typing, say thank you so much for joining. I'm going to try to do it at least 2 times a week, Mondays and Fridays, 5 p.m. And yeah, just to read the books for myself in, early middle age. It's been about 10 or so years since I read them last. And also, there's some talk that I might potentially be reading the audiobooks for, the tracker and the search and the vision and those books as well. And, got to work on my voice acting skills. And yeah, so this will be a regular thing. And I'm going to be doing many, many, many more free events because they're free. And, I like meeting and talking with people. And, for the first time in a good long time, I feel I'm on the path again. My fire's going, and I just got a few, semi-critical issues I need to handle, because I really, really want to get on the road and start teaching and interviewing and exploring. And, because I've essentially spent the last 4 years in a prison that was, partially created by me, and, other things as well. And I've learned the lessons I need to learn from it. I can't change it. And all I can do is the one thing I promised my father I would do the last time I spoke with him, and that is to carry on and share the purity of the original vision. from back when I was a kid. Um, and that's what I will do, you know. And moving forward, as far as my open to the public schedule goes, as soon as I have my things back from Cali, I will be putting up my public class schedule again. But I'm also always available for private online sessions. Um, and people constantly tell me I undervalue myself. When I set out to be my own business, I wanted to make the highest quality nature education available for as cheaply as possible. So any way I can do that, I try and do it, whether it's through free events like this. But I want to start doing even more, physical classes with, 10 or 20 people, and just figuring out a way to subsidize it. And so, yeah, I've been talking to a few grant writers and, people who have raised monies for other projects of the like. And it's I actually wrote Winnebago an email, and I was like, how about you guys give me one of your sweet four-wheel drive vans, and I will just travel around the country teaching free nature classes, and you can document them and use them for your commercials, and then you let me keep the van, and we'll call it even. Haven't heard back from them yet, but never know. Any thoughts on the old tracker syndrome, selling everything you own and going out? So, funny you mentioned that. So, in early June this year, I got booked to photograph a mountain grizzly bear hunt in Alaska. We were 8.5 hours northeast of Anchorage in the middle of nowhere, 55 miles from the nearest town. And we were up there for 2 weeks, 24 hours of daylight. I had some of the most profound experiences in nature ever up there during that time period. I'm still actually working on a documentary about that trip. Um, and it was getting to be the last day of the hunt. And I had been, disconnected from cell service and email for over 2 weeks. And I was just so dreading going back and putting the phone on and just getting the emails. And then I look at this little Forest Service cabin that we're staying in that was built in 1920 and has just been added to by hunters over the years and is held together by tarps, rat crap, and mold and dust. And I would have been much more comfortable having my friends leave me there alone, with my rifle, my sidearm, my knife, and my hatchet, and the gear I had at the beginning of summer in Alaska. Then coming back out into the world and having to put on my, learn how to be a business person hat. Um, so yeah, I very much believe, even though I have the skill, and many people who are listening or they're watching have the skill to go away. The myth, the idea of the lone survivor. As far as like going out with nothing by yourself, there are only a very few places in the world where you can actually pull that off. Um, you were to do that here this time of year, you'd be dead before morning. But you give me my full weather wool suit and my where is it? My weather wool suit and my baby. This is one of the things I carry with me every time I go in the woods is a hand forged camp axe made by my friend Caleb Booth out of a Osage stave that I cut over 15 years ago. And you give me my good straight edge knife, and a few things. It's much easier. Um, but as somebody who's spent a lot of time alone, even if you're an introvert, we still crave the companionship of other people. And that's been one of my biggest struggles is I went from, my whole life of being around sometimes hundreds of people a month. And then the last 4 years, my, associations have been with people who work at the stores I shopped at and my students. And, no friends, no community to call on. And that's what I've been craving more than anything is, just to have that like sense of friendship and community and being around people who are true caretakers, and want to see each other reach as high as they possibly can instead of stepping on their shoulders to try to get one step ahead of that person. And, to think now that, as somebody, my father's son aside, is a 46-year-old man who has spent his whole life perfecting his craft and almost 30 years teaching it professionally, is struggling to make it all work is just like baffling to me. And then to find out that people are actively trying to silence me online, I just, like I said, I'm not going to go into too many details, but I've had things done to me by people I would have died for that I wouldn't even do to somebody I disliked. So, once again, I just try to, forever remain in that place of open thanksgiving. To me, thanksgiving is the most sincere form of prayer because you're not asking for anything. You're just being thankful for your life and the things you have. Every morning I wake up, and the first thing I say is, today's the first day of the rest of my life. And I make the choice to empty my cup and approach my day from the place of the student. I help people if, when, and where I can. And in order to not lose my mind, I've literally had to like break my day into hour blocks, because if I start thinking too far ahead, then I start to panic. So I try to be in the now as much as possible while also, planning for the future. But anyway, y'all, I am going to end this one for the evening. Thank you all so much for attending. I think these get added right to the recordings in the live section, so you'll be able to watch it again or share it. And yeah, help me spread the word. Let people know that, Mondays and Fridays I'll be on here reading chapters from his books and telling a few other stories and things like that. So thank you all for my first successful direct to YouTube stream. And I hope you all have peace, love, joy, and purpose in your life and are thankful, because all that we are is now. And I want to thank you all for attending tonight, because it shows me that at least some people still are interested in what I have to say. Anyway, I love you all very much. Peace and love.